I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We've had a good October full of interesting weather, so hopefully there'll be some fun things to pick out of this webinar. I am Megan Shargorodsky, and I'm with the Kentucky Climate Center, and I'll be your moderator. We have Dr. Stuart Foster, who is the director of the Kentucky Climate Center, and he's also the state climatologist for Kentucky, and he will be leading the main portion of the webinar. We'll also have contributions from Matt Dixon of the University of Kentucky Ag Weather Center, and he will talk about some of the agricultural impacts we have seen across the state. If you have any questions, please feel free to either type them into the chat box or save them until the end, and you'll have the opportunity to ask your question yourself. We also have the YouTube live stream working this time, so you'll have the opportunity to look back at this recording whenever we're finished. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to Stu Foster, and we will go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Megan. And again, welcome everybody to this month's webinar. It's a fairly small group, and it's been kind of a quiet time on the weather front here as we enter early November. Some general information there that if you've been on, you've seen before, so I won't go through all of this. But we have lots of partners that are engaged with us in presenting these webinars. And I'm looking forward, our next one will be in December on the first Thursday there, which is December 3rd. And again, a reminder that if you don't have the drought and hydrologic conditions impact reporter, encourage you to download those and become an active contributor. As we take a look at the month ahead here and looking back here, we'll take a look at our recent conditions, impacts over the last month, and then outlooks as we start to shift into the winter season in the midst of a strengthening La Nina. So that may present some interesting weather and climatic conditions for us going forward. So got a couple photos here. The one there in Webster County, you can see a circulation of a thunderstorm there in the background, pretty impressive photograph. And that was on one of the really 2 days that we had some pretty significant weather and rainfall in the month of October, which again, normally is a fairly quiet month in terms of severe weather and such. And then in the bottom, a picture there of pasture in northern Shelby County. And again, just a reminder of this year versus last year. We've got a lot of green pasture doing very well. Last year we had cattle on hay, and we're in a very different kind of situation. And Matt will provide you some more details in terms of the ag side of things here in a little bit. Precipitation wise, over the last 30 days, our amounts across the Ohio River Valley there, kind of running along the river, we had heavier precipitation, again, particularly late in the month on the 29th. And you can see amounts there from the far western part of the state in the 6 to 7 inch range. And then again, going up toward the Cincinnati area, northern Kentucky, they drop off a little bit into the 4 to 5 inch range of measured precipitation. Got a little bit of yellow there in terms of estimated precipitation based on radar. That's in the 8 to 10 inch category. We don't have any mesonet stations that actually observe quite that much, but there may have been some somewhat higher amounts than what we captured. And then as you look at the southeastern part of the state, a little bit drier there. You've got a lot of amounts that are in the 3 inch range, 3 to 4 inch range for the most part, but for the month of October, precipitation was pretty well distributed. There weren't any extraordinarily dry portions of the state. And then if we look at the 60-day totals, and again, we'll start along the Ohio River in the western part of the state and then going up toward the Cincinnati metropolitan area. And you can see again, those amounts are in the 7, 8 inch range. And that's pretty similar to what the amounts were on the 30-day total. So that was if you go back and look at the period, the kind of day 31 to day 60, that was a pretty dry spell in there during most of the month of October, or September, I should say. You may recall that we had some significant rains just the first few days of September, but that doesn't get captured in the 60-day window that kind of stops before we get to the 1st of September. And then again, amounts in the southeastern part of the state in the 4, 5, 6 inch range in some cases. We do have some higher amounts there in the 8 to 10 inch range of precipitation over the 60-day period, but much of that 60-day total is reflected in the 30-day total. And then the 90-day totals, we go back and we capture a good chunk of August, and we get our amounts back well over 10 inches to 12 to 15 inches in kind of the most extreme cases. And again, for the most part, pretty well distributed across the state. If you kind of pick one part of the state versus another, you can see the amounts are, there's variation locally, but there are no major trends evident in precipitation over that 90-day period. If you look up to the northwest outside of Kentucky, though, you can see a very different story there, where it was extremely dry in parts of Illinois, Indiana, and into Ohio, but we were fortunate not to have to deal with that. So we look at the precipitation totals as a percent of normal. In the upper left, you can see the 30-day totals, and the colors in the greens and blues are areas where we were above normal precipitation. The blues are somewhere 150 to over 200%, depending on how the shading of the blue is. And again, that's that area up along the Ohio River and extending up into some of those areas in the Midwest that had been extremely dry. A little bit of the portion of Kentucky there in the yellows and beiges are just right around, just a little bit above or a little bit below normal over that 30-day period. If you look at the 60-day, you see, again, a large portion of the state that was below normal precipitation-wise, anywhere from 50% to close to normal. And then a few areas where we had more abundant precipitation and ran well above normal. But the largest portion of the state was dry for that 60-day period compared to normal. And then the 90-day period, again, pretty uniform coverage, some localized variability, but all in all, precipitation amounts running above normal over the state. And again, that's going back into August. Temperature-wise, in terms of high temperatures during the last 30 days, we were right near normal across most of the state. A little bit cooler in the west, but otherwise very close to where we should be this time of year in terms of daily high temperatures. Our daily low temperatures, not much different, just a little bit warmer, and that's showing up a little bit more so in southeastern part of the state compared to the western part of the state. But again, if you look at temperature and precipitation for the last 30 days, basically the month of October, it's pretty unremarkable in terms of precipitation, temperature, both being pretty close to where we would expect them to be this time of year. And you've seen this graph before, but just a reminder, put this up occasionally, looking at that 24-month standardized precipitation index, that running 24-month window. So we've just We added on, we actually for this, we do not have the October totals in there yet. So this is ending through September. But again, you can see that we are up between 2 and 3 in terms of the index value, well above normal, and very much historically significant in terms of this very intense and prolonged wet period that we're experiencing here in Kentucky. As you might guess, then, if we look at soil moisture, modeled soil moisture and groundwater across the state, they're both very healthy, above normal in terms of soil moisture and groundwater indicators. So, different approaches to trying to essentially measure the same thing. So they should be pretty consistent with one another, and that's the case. You can see again that the Western U.S., talk a little bit about drought here, is a very different story. But here in the Southeast, we've got a pretty large area that's been relatively wet. Sorry about that, Megan. Soil moisture from some of our selected mesonet stations, Henderson County in the upper left and Madison County in the lower left. Henderson County is an area that had been getting dry, but really benefited from the rains. And that was one of the areas that received the heaviest amount of precipitation there late in the month. And you can see how soil moisture bounced back very nicely, and is pretty much, where we would expect it to be, kind of a healthy value for this time of year. Likewise, Madison County, a portion of the state that had been drying out much more so, sort of a bullseye in terms of dryness earlier in the summer, and recent rains again have helped to replenish soil moisture in that area. The upper right, we're looking at Clark County there, just a little bit east of Lexington, and in the lower right, we're staying over in the eastern. Again, everything's pretty even keel in terms of soil moisture, consistent with what we saw in the modeled data on the previous slide. 7-day stream flows are generally averaging above to much above normal, still a reflection of the impact of that heavy precipitation event that we had on the 29th, which followed up some significant rains on the 23rd. So we've brought a good bit of moisture into the environment here over the last couple of weeks, and it shows up in terms of our stream flows for this time of year, which otherwise would tend to be pretty low. 28-day averages, somewhat similar, not quite as many values in the higher percentiles, because we're going back over a longer period of time before we've had those two recent precipitation events. And no flooding currently across the state. Again, even though we had all of that rain, we may have had during events a little bit of localized flooding, street flooding, that sort of thing. But given that conditions had been drying out, no flood issues developed as a result of those heavier rains. So U.S. Drought Monitor, Chip Zimmer was busy earlier this summer trying to figure out which direction Kentucky was going to go, and whether we were going to kind of move into drought or not. And the rains have kind of eased that concern as we get very late into the year. And so our drought here in the U.S. is really concentrated in the western half of the country. And while we still have some drought conditions that are present in the Midwest, and it's through central Illinois and Indiana, no drought in Kentucky, Tennessee, or really anywhere that seems to be encroaching upon us here in the state. So that's a good thing. And if we look at how that situation has changed, there has been in the area of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, some improvement over the last month with the rains that came. So not only are we not having drought conditions, but things have been trending in a positive manner for us within the region. If we look in the western U.S., again, it's been, for the most part, drought conditions have persisted. Some areas have intensified a bit into the Great Plains states, starting to see a little bit more intensity of drought with a little bit of improvement in the Pacific Northwest, parts of Idaho, and western Montana. So storm impacts, again, we mentioned we just had a couple significant events there in the month, October 23rd. We had some hail reports there. You can see them in Todd County, Logan County, and Taylor County there. But again, that was small hail. There were no real reports of damage as a result of it, just documenting that it had occurred. And then otherwise, we had some heavy winds with the storms on the 23rd, knocked some trees down, but no major damage, power outages, that sort of thing. And then on the 29th, several reports there, particularly in the western part of the state, of heavy rainfall being documented. But again, no significant flooding and impacts per se. So Megan, I'll send it back to you and up the road to Lexington.
All right, now we'll bring on Matt Dixon to talk about some of the agricultural impacts.
All right, thanks guys. Just like spring, we're now in a transitional time of year. Some weeks will be great for ag and some won't. We've seen that recently. We just have to take advantage of those good ones. This has been the norm in recent weeks. We started the month off on the dry side and it carried over from the second half of September. We did see the remnants of Hurricane Delta. It's been the norm this year. We have all these tropical systems moving through. But we did see the remnants of Hurricane Delta move through the area over the second week of the month. But that was primarily across southeastern Kentucky and stayed away from the main grain producing counties. We also were impacted a bit from temperatures during that time period. While harvest was in full go, we did have some cooler temperatures in place, and that cooler weather had corn drying down more slowly in the fields compared to 2019 when we were very dry and we were very warm. So moving on, we then turned extremely wet over the past couple of weeks, as everybody's seen, with yet another tropical system, Zeta, and in combination with the disturbance of loft pushing through the area. As you can imagine, this has had quite the impact on harvest this year, but more or less it's just pushing the brakes on it. We started the month pretty close to that 5-year average pace on getting corn and beans out of the field. But with these wet conditions, we've seen those numbers widen a little bit. Looking at the table from the crop progress and condition report, this came out on Monday. 88% of corn has been harvested and 56% of beans. Beans are running 13% behind that normal pace, while corn is 5% behind that pace. While these numbers are a bit behind, we do have a couple bright spots. First, with these tropical systems, we didn't have any major wind, not with this past one, Zeta, or any of the ones we saw throughout the month of October. Secondly, we've had great harvest weather this week. I went and worked on a weather station at Woodford County yesterday and had to take a picture located there in the lower right-hand corner. We had sunny skies, we had dry conditions, we had mild temperatures, which has been the case this entire work week, and it looks like it's going to continue through the upcoming weekend and maybe into the early stages of next work week. So it's been a great week for farmers across the state. While we're running behind right now in harvest, I imagine those numbers we see in the crop report will shift dramatically for the better in the report next Monday, and we'll make up some ground. So crop conditions over to the right are still running on the good side of the spectrum, while pasture growth is on the decline as we get later into fall. Temperatures in the 60s and 70s this week, combined with rainfall we saw last week, it will promote some growth and add some grazing time. I read in the past crop report that 65% of feed is still coming from pastures at this point. Some hay is starting to be fed, but the crop report also mentioned recently that stocked hay supply should be good overall in the upcoming months. This will only look better with additional grazing time. Lastly, looking at the map of low temperatures from the Kentucky Mesnet, the growing season officially came to an end this past Monday morning. It's almost hard to believe now that we are getting into the 60s and 70s again. It was only a few days ago that lows were plummeting well into the 20s. And in fact, you can see on the map a good portion of the state dipped into the low to middle 20s. Just to give everyone a heads up, the freeze warning on Monday will be the last frost or freeze product we see until next spring. The last warning, last advisory. The National Weather Service issues these products based in a large part on the susceptibility of ag at any point in time. And with temperatures in the 20s on Monday, this ended the 2020 growing season. So if you did bring some plants inside earlier this week and have since put them back outside, you'll have to keep an eye on that forecast with no more warnings or advisories issued. So with that, I'm going to end it there. I'll send it back to Stu for a look at the outlooks.
Thanks, Matt. And actually, I'm going to ask you a question now instead of waiting toward the end. Do you have a sense, and it's fine if you're not, if you don't have it off the top of your head, but do you have a sense when you look at those crop condition numbers? We've talked now for a while. In the last couple of months, you've reported that conditions for the year have just been overall pretty favorable, and we got a large percentage in the good category and some in the excellent category even. How does that compare historically over the last several years? Can you think of some other years that topped this, or is this, about as good as we could expect to be? Matt? Okay, well, I guess he's not on there or muted, so I'll go ahead and continue. And if he or somebody else has a comment on that later, we can take that at the end. All right, let's go to the next slide then, Megan.
Matt unmuted, so I don't know if he's back or not.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I'll look more into that for next month and get back to you on that. But talking with some farmers listening to some farmers on a podcast recently, I've heard yields are looking pretty good this year, corn and beans. And they mentioned on the podcast, there's no really poor ground. There's no really good ground. The ground's just been consistent in producing pretty good yield. So, but I'll look more into those numbers for next month's podcast or webinar.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you, Matt. We'll move on to the outlooks with Dr. Foster.
All right, so looking out 7 days, precipitation forecast. Eastern half of the state, you got a good bit of blue in there that is predicting somewhere around an inch plus or minus of precipitation, and some other areas a little bit less than that in the green, about a quarter or half inch. So something amounts that are fairly typical, and again, that would appear to be more toward the back end of that 7-day period. As Matt mentioned, the next few days are expected to continue to be dominated by fair weather. Six to 10-day outlook, and you'll see with the next slide on the 8 to 14-day outlook, we've got a kind of a roller coaster ridging and troughing pattern in terms of the upper air circulation, dominated by a trough in the west and a ridge in the east. So we've got a very strong indication of above normal temperatures continuing for the 6 to 10 day outlook. So that's November 10th to the 14th. And that's meant, lately we've been looking at temperatures in the 60s and 70s. So we're going to continue to get some October kind of weather here into the first part of November. On the precipitation side of things, we have an enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation in that 6 to 10 day window, with the greatest probabilities farther east. And some of that may be related to another tropical system or very late in the year that could affect the eastern portion of the U.S. there. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But 6 to 10 day outlook looks warmer and perhaps wetter than normal. If we go to the 8 to 14 day outlook, we'll see something fairly similar, but it's starting to dampen a little bit. That the ridge and trough pattern is starting to dampen out a little bit, so that and at some point we'll start to move eastward. But we still continue to expect warmer than normal conditions over that November 12th to 19th window, with a slightly enhanced likelihood of above normal precipitation through that period. For the month as a whole, this is kind of confusing. The temperature side makes sense. We talked about above normal temperatures. We've had some very pleasant weather first few days. We're expecting that to continue basically over the next couple of weeks. So the month-long outlook of above normal temperatures seems to be a pretty good bet at this point. On the right, though, there's a slightly enhanced likelihood of below normal precipitation. And again, it's been dry so far this month, but we're expecting to get into a window of above normal precipitation for a period of time. But again, the month as a whole, slightly enhanced likelihood of below normal precipitation. So again, when you put that together with the previous ones, it seems like there's maybe a little bit more uncertainty on the precipitation side of things. The La Nina circulation we mentioned last month. We've been talking about La Nina now for a little while, and last month we confirmed that La Nina had formed, and we were in a La Nina phase. We continue to be in that phase. It appears at this point that the conditions are intensifying in terms of the body of colder than normal temperatures in the equatorial Pacific, and the expanse of that increasing. So the intensity of the La Nina circulation getting stronger. And so we have an 85% chance of that continuing through the winter months, and at least into the spring season in 2021. And again, as a reminder, as a country as a whole, that tends to mean warmer and drier to the south of us, often cooler and wetter sometimes to the north, and we're kind of in between there. If you look at the map, we're kind of in a bullseye area from the Great Lakes down the River Valley, where we tend to be wetter than normal in the winter months. And again, we're not in the winter months yet, so we're heading that direction. So when we look at the impacts of that here in Kentucky, we've seen this slide the last couple months. If you go to the bottom row and the third window over for October, November, and December, we're looking at precipitation. And again, this is a graph that goes back to 1950, and each year is plotted there. So on the left side of that, in the kind of blue shading, are the La Nina years. And the bright blue line is the median average precipitation across the state. And the individual white lines and associated circles are the individual years, and they give you an idea of the variability of precipitation in past years where we were in a La Nina phase. So From that, you can see that, our precipitation, expected precipitation is based on the median is just slightly less than if we were in a neutral phase or El Nino phase, really very little difference. But more importantly, there's quite a bit of variability. We've had La Nina years that were very wet through the October, November, December window, and we've had some that were pretty dry. So it really doesn't give us a lot of confidence as to what it might mean for us. The other thing, though, that you might point out there, or might note there, is if you look at the really dry years, we've had some El Nino years on the right side in the kind of orangish red. We've had some El Nino years that were extremely dry through that 3-month period, but not the case in the La Nina. So if anything, a kind of a dampened response historically during La Nina conditions on the precipitation side at this time of year. And that will change once we get into the heart of the winter months, but we'll talk about that later. And then if we look at average temperature for October, November, December, the median value would say that we're just ever so slightly warmer on average during a La Nina. But again, the variability associated with each of those white lines that again sort of show like a barcode there indicates that there's nothing that you can say definitively that would where we would look at it and say, gee, a La Nina tends to mean that we're going to be warmer or colder or whatever. It's just not a strong signal where we are at this time of year. So seasonal outlooks, based on the La Nina, that really influences the Climate Prediction Center's outlooks. And for the country as a whole, the November through January period, a likelihood of staying warmer than normal, especially across the southern portion, with equal chances of warmer, cooler, or near normal temperatures along the northern tier. And then on precipitation, again, the likelihood of drier conditions to the south and wetter conditions in the northern plains. We're kind of in an equal chances area. And again, that's consistent with our historical period. It's also consistent with the forecast discussion, which at this point indicates a good bit of uncertainty about not the La Nina circulation pattern, but the Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation that is more difficult to predict and forecast ahead of time or with very much lead time. And it can significantly affect our weather even in the midst of a La Nina. So bottom line is there's just not a lot of clarity based on the climate models as to how that might play out. So once we come back next month, we may have a little bit more clarity at that point. We'll see. Monthly stream flow outlook from our friends at the Ohio River Forecast Center. Anywhere from normal to above normal stream flows projected for the month of November. And again, that's a reflection of the heavy precipitation we had there late in October. Seasonal flood outlook, we do have some orange and red on there. Again, we're going into the winter season. It's been wet over the last couple weeks with those couple big events that haven't gotten through the system yet. And that precipitation outlook over the next couple weeks has some possibility of above normal precipitation. But again, this also the signal for La Nina for the winter as a whole, not so much for the next month or so, but for the winter as a whole, would call for an enhanced likelihood of wetter than normal conditions. So there may be a number of factors that go into this. And again, there's orange and red there, but it's only indicating at least a 25% or 1 out of 4 chance of some flooding occurring. We'll keep an eye on it. With the wet conditions recently, the risk of wildfire has pretty much disappeared here in the eastern U.S. and fortunately in most of the western U.S. too. So to summarize, we had some emerging dryness that was eased by the widespread rains in late October. Soil moisture and groundwater levels are looking good. Streams are above normal, not posing any major issues at this time. As we look at the month of November, we're likely to be warmer than normal, and a little bit of uncertainty about the precipitation. The monthly outlook's drier than normal, but the 6 to 10, 8 to 14 day outlook are suggesting possibility of wetter than normal conditions after we've started the month kind of dry. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. And then again, La Nina conditions expected to persist through the fall and winter seasons. At this time of year, La Nina doesn't have a strong signal here in Kentucky, but as we get further into the winter, we'll start to see a more predictable or stronger signal. And so again, we'll keep a close eye on how that La Nina circulation is developing, whether it continues to strengthen as we move forward. So with that, Megan, I'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you. And thank you for a great presentation. So from now we will take a moment to open up the floor for the participants to ask any questions. I noticed that Chip Zimmer and Matt Dixon put a couple of things in the chat. So I think that's regarding some of the agricultural impacts. So if you want to take a minute and look at that, as well as if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Additionally, if you're on the YouTube live stream, feel free to type into that chat box as well, and I'll be able to see that too. All right, Mary Dahl just asked a question. On one of the sessions earlier this year, it was mentioned that the May freeze may cause problems for wildlife as it impacted their food sources. Did we see problems with that during the summer, or is it anticipated for this winter?
Yeah, I certainly don't have any information on that personally. And I mean, certainly there, to the extent that we lost fruit or oak mast and that sort of thing, then that could be an issue, but I'm just not familiar. I don't know if we have anybody on the call that has some information on that.
Matt, do you have any information regarding her question?
Yeah, I don't have info on that at the moment, but it's something I could look into. If you send me an email, matt.dixon@uky.edu, if I could get your email, I can look into it.
Okay, it's a great question. So does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask? All right, I don't see any other questions from the group, so we will go ahead and wrap this up. The next regularly scheduled webinar is Thursday, December 3rd at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And as usual, our contacts for the various sectors are listed here. I will email them out once the recording is finalized. And then also the links for the Drought and Hydrologic Impact Reporter. So if there's nothing else, thank you guys so much for participating today, and I hope you have a great day.